staying informed to your comfort level is really important. You don't have to be like a news junkie who's listening to the news constantly every day like me, but having an awareness of what's going on is really, really important, because the way that bad things happen is when people aren't watching, when people aren't paying attention. So just basic blanket paying attention is really, really important.
Welcome to the Shine Strategy Podcast, where entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business owners are getting visible and changing the world. I'm your host, Heather Burgett, an award-winning publicist, entrepreneur, and business mentor. Today's show is sponsored by PR Stars. For more inspiration and Shine strategies, head over to shineinsiders.com now for my free masterclass so that you too can get visible and go from local to global. Hey, Shine Insiders! Are you tired of being the best kept secret in your industry? Well, I have a solution for you, and it's called free publicity, and we can actually get it for you fast. Go ahead on over to podcast.theshinestrategy.com. Over there, you're going to find my free pitch template, and that's going to help you get into major newspapers so that you can stop struggling to find your clients. Let them find you. We also have all of our show notes over there. You'll also see how to join my community and my upcoming free masterclass. So again, that's podcast.theshinestrategy.com. All right, everyone, let's dig in. Hello, Shine Insiders. I'm so excited to introduce you today to Alise Morales.
Hello.
I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, I'm such a fangirl that I hope we're going to have a lot of fun today.
Oh, we definitely are.
Everyone, Alise is a comedy writer and performer based out of Brooklyn, New York. We only just met, but I feel like I know her so well from listening to her all the time. And I just have to put it out there that I am such a big fan, and I love how she presents the news. You might have heard her as the co-host of the wildly popular Betches Sup podcast, where you can hear all the latest news of the week from a damn funny perspective. And I have laughed out loud so many times at your commentary and that of your co-host. You guys are hysterical.
Thank you.
You also might have heard her as the voice of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Showtime's Our Cartoon President. You have been on MTV's College Quickies series, IFC's Comedy Crib. You've won the NBC UCB Diversity Scholarship Showcase. You have done so many amazing things. You have an original show, The Roast of Your 15-Year-Old Self, which has toured the country. We've seen you on Hulu's Difficult People, Late Night with Seth Meyers, and Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. And you have just been all over the place. So it's such an honor to have you here today with us. And I do want to ask you, the last piece of your bio, it says that you hope to start wearing more adventurous types of pants this year.
Yes.
How's that going?
It's actually, there are stops and starts. I bought an adventurous sort of a wide-legged pant from ASOS the other day, but it came in the mail. They're a little too big. I'm going to get them tailored, and we're going to see.
I love it. So I was thinking more like funky designs or patterns or...
I have a pretty quirky style, so I'm usually good with like patterns and designs. I've got a lot of that, but I stuck to a very like straight-legged, skinny jean pant look, and I've been trying to branch out into more wide leg options, palazzo pants, different waistlines. We're trying new things.
I love it. Take it back to the boot cut.
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard the boot cut is back.
I know. I keep seeing it. I'm like, God, I used to love the boot cut. So
I will not go back to low-rise jeans, though. That I won't do.
No, I'll skip that one with you, too. I have so many questions for you about the show and your work. And, I would have to say that my perspective on the Betches Sup podcast is kind of like you guys presenting the news like in sort of this millennial audio version of how Jon Stewart presented the news for years on The Daily Show.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, I want to talk about this.
That's very nice of you to say, because the early Daily Show is one of my biggest influences ever. I would watch The Daily Show and The Colbert Report in high school, I would watch it every night. And then in college, I would watch the night before's show in the morning, both of them, as I was like getting ready to go to class. And I was just like, Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert were my idols. So that's very nice of you to say. And Brian, who's one of my co-hosts, interned and worked both at Jon Stewart's Daily Show and The Colbert Report.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask if that had been an inspiration to you, because there's just that fun vibe and, the take on news and politics that obviously is more of a left view, but it's just laugh out loud funny. And it's really like calling things out as they are and putting like the big picture perspective on kind of the absurdity of all the things that do happen in the news. Mm-hmm. And so who else are your people that have inspired you in this path?
Those two are definitely two really big ones. I do love what Samantha Bee is doing. I love her show. I think that it's like really sharp, really interesting. I like that she doesn't pull any punches. And I find that really like inspiring to me. And I also, I really enjoy what Crooked Media is doing and their podcast, the Pod Save America world, and all of them. I've taken a lot of inspiration from just like all of that. I mean, even going back as far as like Amy Poehler and Tina Fey on Weekend Update, like the original sort of making fun of the news. The original sort of making fun of the news is Weekend Update, and those two, and also Seth Meyers on that, were like so amazing. And I feel like all of them showed me a path where you can make fun of the news and you can talk about it and you can talk about all these things that are happening in a funny way, while also keeping in mind that like these are real things and trying not to like undercut the seriousness of what's happening while also talking about them in a funny way.
And how did you initially get involved with the show?
So my involvement with Betches goes back a really long time. I was a fan. They started as just like a website that was like a list called like the Betch List. And it was way more satirical. It was honestly more like written pieces sort of the voice of this like college girl character. It's definitely really different than what the website is now, but that's when I got involved in it and started writing for them maybe the first year I moved to New York, so around like 2012. And I would always pitch to them political pieces, and they started doing like fairly well as people, were getting, I feel like interest in politics has grown as like the news has become crazier. I think people are like, wait, I do need to know like why this is happening. So I think those started gaining more traction on the site. And then the women who run Betches had the idea of starting a newsletter. And because I had already been interested in all these political pieces, they came to me to write the newsletter. So for a while, the newsletter was just like 3 days a week out of my room. And then it started doing more and more. And they brought me on full time. And I started doing the newsletter every day. And pretty shortly after that, internally, Sammy, who is one of the founders of the company and also one of the co-hosts of the podcast, we realized it just made sense to be doing a podcast. And Betches has been working really hard to get in that space. Like they've launched so many podcasts recently in all sorts of different sectors. So it just made sense that we already had this sort of inbuilt political fan base. Why not also do a podcast on top of that?
Yeah, that sounds like it just made perfect sense in the evolution of how it all came to be. And so, and I found the podcast first, and then I finally subscribed to the newsletter. And I didn't realize you were writing it at first, but I was pretty sure you were, because your voice is so distinctive as a comedian that I was like, this all sounds like Alise. So it's great to know. So you're writing that, and that's a daily, or how often does that come out?
Yeah, it comes out Monday through Friday, usually like between 1 and noon, depending on how long it takes for me to personally read and digest what's happening.
So that's a daily. Every morning you have to see what's happening in the world and then find a lens on it that kind of sometimes pokes fun or tries to make light of some pretty serious things.
Yeah, I mean, there are times where I just will write what happened and like not include a joke because it's too serious or too soon, like if like someone has died and that's involved, I'll steer clear of like making any jokes in the first 24 hours.
Too soon.
Yeah, exactly. But for the most part, usually my routine is that I get up and I listen to NPR has a really good Up First podcast that they record super early in the morning that just gives you kind of like an overview of what's going on. And usually I'll compare that with trending topics on Twitter, and then the New York Times' morning report that they send out that's kind of a similar like breakdown of different stories. And between those things, I'll cull it down and figure out like what the topics of the newsletter are going to be and how I'm going to write about them to try to get the information across, but also keeping the funny voice of the newsletter as well.
Yeah, and you do a great job at that. I mean, it's rare that I laugh out loud on a newsletter, and I do that with your newsletters too. So.
Thank you.
And, being here at the Shine Strategy, we're a lot about business, inspiration, and strategies for people to get their messages out into the world. Me having the background of coming from, being a publicist and public relations. We don't often talk a ton about politics here, but I do think they are very, very vitally important to our future. And picking a side and taking action and voting is so key. And being that I'm a fan of your show, and if anyone's ever followed me on social media, they probably know that my politics are in line with not being a Trump fan. And we even had a guest on my show recently, Rob Dial, who made the excellent comment that he's not really that political of a person, but he just isn't a fan of Trump because he doesn't think Trump is very nice. And so I love how you guys start out with your segment in the beginning about what's keeping you sane in Trump's America. And that's a great way to start off the show on a lighter note. And so how do you decide what you're going to feature there?
So usually for what's getting me through, we try to focus on like a funnier or a silly story in the news. So it's usually something where it's like, is this story ultimately important to the greater health of the American nation? Probably not. But is it really funny and fun for us to talk about? Yes. So, and that can sometimes veer into like pop culture things that are happening, or like things sometimes in our own personal life. Like today, Brian's what's getting me through is that he got a puppy, and then I got to see pictures of the puppy, and it was wonderful.
That's always a good vibe when you can see a puppy.
Yeah, exactly. So typically it'll be something that like made us laugh that week or something silly. And it's nice. It's really nice to have that buffer at the top of the podcast, because sometimes we are talking about things that are serious, and sometimes we're talking about things that, personally upsetting to talk about. And so it's nice to start out with something that's just like a dumb, frivolous thing where we can get like our giggles out or whatever, and then really focus up for the actual news of the day. Because sometimes we have some serious information to impart about different topics that like can seem really complicated, and we have to break them down. So it's nice to have that buffer at the beginning.
Yeah, I think I definitely appreciate that, because it sort of sets the mood as, because a lot of the things that you guys dig into are so intense and complicated. And I mean, everything, from gun control or shootings or, whatever's out there happening at the moment, because, you guys are keeping your finger right on the pulse. I think did you just go to 2 days a week, or has it been 2 days for a while?
It's been 2 days for a while. We were trying to do it as like a Facebook Live thing, and it was just me and Sammy, and it was a lot more like gamey and had a lot more segments and stuff like that. And then Facebook changed its algorithm. There was a whole thing where Facebook, put a lot of interest behind video and like in ways inflated the views, and then just like stopped cold turkey. So the videos went from like so many views to nothing. And we realized like what we were accomplishing with the video, we could accomplish way better with a podcast, reach way more people, and it was like less time intensive and crazy for us. So I think that we went to 2 days a week basically once we started the podcast.
Yeah, and it's just so like, I often do news show detoxes because it is so stressful to constantly be watching like the network news and, getting your news from these traditional sources because they bring you down so much. So that's, for me, energetically, like, I love that I can get some news from you guys, but not have it totally ruin my day. I mean, it still sometimes ruins my day, but it's a little less harsh than watching it on like the nightly news.
I think that is one of our missions, is to ruin your day slightly less.
That's a great motto, a tagline or motto there. I love it.
Exactly.
So, we've actually had Marianne Williamson as a guest, and I know she gets a lot of slack from the media, but, she's a big author idol of mine. And
I have much love for Marianne.
Yeah, she's had some real powerful ideas and plans, and I think she's still fighting for her spot on the next debate. She didn't make this one, but, I asked her, what can the average person do to help with what's happening in our country? And she joked, well, I'm running for president. So what sort of, I thought, oh gosh, now I feel like pretty lame. But, so what sort of calls to action or thoughts do you have? I know you guys are very active about motivating people to get out there and vote. Like, what advice would you have for people? What can they do?
For sure. I think, number one, staying informed to your comfort level is really important. You don't have to be like a news junkie who's listening to the news constantly every day like me, but having an awareness of what's going on is really, really important, because the way that bad things happen is when people aren't watching, when people aren't paying attention. So just basic blanket paying attention is really, really important. After that, making sure you're registered to vote, you're voting, even in when it comes to local elections, that can be really powerful, because actually you have the ability to make bigger change closer to where you are. So if you are able to get involved at a local level in your community, that's a really, really powerful thing to do. And that's a way to get involved in politics that also can feel probably less partisan and less maybe involved in this world of this very exhausting world of Trump stuff and everybody's mad at each other and all of these things. You can get involved in a local level and not have to touch on those issues, but still make a really big change. And I think that's important. And then supporting candidates that you really believe in, whether that be, I know not everybody has the luxury of being able to go out and knock on doors or do that and phone banking and stuff like that. But even just setting up a $5 donation, right now I have a $5 donation going to my favorite primary candidate. And that's just where I'm at right now. And that's helping. You don't have to, you can understand that you're able to meet, being involved politically where you are, and you can do as much as you have the ability to do. I think people will sometimes talk themselves out of doing things because they're well, if I start by just donating $5 a month, I'm never going to be that person who's walking around knocking on doors. And it's it's okay. You can be $5 a month person, and that's fine.
I love that reframe for people, because I think, often everyone, will put so much pressure on themselves to do something grandiose, or, think that you have to do something so time consuming to really get involved. And you really don't. It's like these things you're talking about, of just being aware or making donations or talking to people, or maybe just even on your social media, putting the issues out there that people think are important. So yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I think that, social media, it gets a bad reputation for a lot of things. There's always that, that thought of the slacktivist who's tweeting but not really doing anything. But on a certain level, there is a value to sharing, a sourced article on your social media page that maybe people wouldn't have seen that about an issue that you care about. There is actually a value to at least just spreading the message along, being hey, have you seen this?
Yeah. And I love that your show sheds light on so many different issues. So do you have any all-time favorite segments of issues that you've highlighted?
Ooh, that's really interesting. Let me think. It's interesting, but I've really enjoyed talking about Brexit. I've kind of become the de facto Brexit person on the podcast. And we've developed it now into a segment called British News. And like,
is that when you did your little dee?
Yeah.
That was good.
British News.
I love it.
And obviously, like, I mean, Brexit is a serious topic. Personally, I would prefer if that did not happen, but it can be sometimes complicated for just like your average everyday American who's not familiar with the parliamentary system even to like fully understand all the wild things that are happening in Brexit. And a lot of these things are truly really crazy things that are happening. So it's been really fun to not only like explain the ins and outs of that system, but also do it in a way where we can be like, and now you understand why it's so crazy that this happened on the floor of the House of Commons and stuff. So it's like I bring everybody up to speed and then we're able to all like talk about it together, which is really fun.
Yeah, and John Oliver does some really great coverage of what's happening with that as well.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even say John Oliver at the beginning, but Last Week Tonight is so good. And that's been such a huge inspiration. Like what they do is awesome. And everyone on that writing staff is like whip smart too. They're some of the best people.
Yeah, it's very sharp, very sharply written. And I know the tagline for this show is "Until the End of Democracy." But, you know, with all that's going on in the world, I was like, maybe the tagline should be "Until the End of the World."
I know. Which comes first?
Well, it's like the environment to me is one of the scariest things happening right now that's out there. And I love, you guys had an episode called "We Are Literally Wiping Our Ass with Our Future." We might have to bleep that because I'm a non-explicit show. But and about the destruction of forests to make toilet paper. And it's like, if we can't get a grip on this stuff, then none of the other thing, the politics, the economics, like none of that's going to matter. So, you know, what are your thoughts on, you know, what's going on in the environment?
Well, yeah, I mean, climate change related episodes are some of the hardest for me because one, I'm like trying to learn science, which I have not actively pursued in my life really. And then two, it does feel like such a huge, crazy issue. And sometimes it can feel like, again, it's like self-defeating because you're like, well, okay, I can switch from plastic straws, but that's not gonna, you know, change the temperature, like the climate from warming 2 degrees and the ice caps from melt, you know, like you can really spiral with climate change, which is why I was really happy when we talked to a woman named Flannery Winchester, who works at Citizens Climate Lobby. And we kind of went into it expecting the answer to this question to be no, but we were like, is it really helpful to do meatless Mondays and to switch out your straws and to recycle and all that stuff, or are we doomed no matter what? And she was like, no, it's a mixture of both of those things. Yeah, it's what Elizabeth Warren was talking about in the climate debate about how we need to like refocus on corporations and the pollution that they're doing because they're some 70% of that pollution. But we can make a difference making small changes about the environment and just taking a look at your own consumption. Like I know my Con Ed will send me every couple of months like a readout on how efficient I am in comparison with my neighbors. And I just happened to actually sit down and read it this time. And I was like, oh, it had a bunch of helpful hints in there about like how much energy I could use. They were like, you can actually turn your refrigerator up to this and this such and such many degrees, and it'll save you this % of energy, or just like little tips and tricks of things that I never would have thought of. And like over time, if we all started doing that, you know, even knocking down 10% of overall emissions is like better than where we're at right now.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And that's where I was laughing with your, you know, the show about the toilet paper. I said, what if we all just use one square less a day? one little square less a day. The whole planet. Imagine how many trees, how many forests that would save.
Yes. I mean, it is crazy to think about it, but it's like when when it does add up to everyone just doing one square less, it is a huge deal. It's like when, Elizabeth Warren is talking about, I think it's for her healthcare policy, she would pay for it with a tax on 2 cents on every dollar after 50 million or whatever. And it would all add up to pay for everyone to get health insurance. And it's so crazy when you think about like these little tiny things adding up to these like giant movements and being able to affect giant change. But it is. And like when you try to just focus on your tiny thing, it's more manageable and you're actually contributing to the greater change in the end.
And I think it's sort of that living and being the example, be the change that you want to be. And so exactly. You inspire when other people see you doing something, well, then maybe they might start doing it. And it does sort of catch on. And so I think every bit does count. I totally agree with that.
For sure.
And, let's go back. So when you were a kid, like how old were you when you realized like, I have a gift for this comedy thing and this is what I want to do?
So I was always a theater kid, like 100%. I actually, I lived most of my life in Virginia, but when I was little, up until I was 12, we lived out in Los Angeles because my parents just like up and moved to LA when they got married. And so I went to like a very fancy acting school for children because I wanted to be a very serious child actress. And then my parents were like, my mom was like, no, I got a promotion. We're moving to Virginia. So my career as a serious child actress ended there because there isn't really a scene for that in Virginia. Yeah. But I always was like super into the plays in high school, super like loved doing them. That was like always my focus, a drama, like just drama nerd through and through. But I was never great at singing or dancing. So so there's always a part, I feel like every musical has a part that's like, there's the one funny, it's usually like an old woman and she's funny and she doesn't really sing a song, but she gets to like,
she gets the laugh.
Yeah, she gets the laugh. It's like Jack's mom in Into the Woods. I'm trying to think. There's definitely one in South Pacific. There's a bunch. There's just like a random old woman who doesn't sing and she gets the laugh. And so I was always the random old woman. Oh, God. I was cast as the random old woman and everything. And I was like, you know what? I'm actually pretty good at playing the random old woman. Like, and I really like doing it. So that was like what first got in my head that comedy was something that I enjoyed, but I didn't know how to pursue it because it's not something you just see someone who's a stand-up, but you don't know how they did that really. You're just like, oh, huh.
It seems like they magically just are doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't see how it happens for a stand-up the way you kind of know, like, okay, well, actors, they like go on auditions and they get bigger and bigger auditions and they'll get the part, like even if you're not like in the acting world, you kind of have an understanding of that's how it's done. But comedy, I didn't really know how someone does comedy until I got to college and I joined my college improv team. And a bunch of people from that improv team, because I went to University of Delaware, which isn't far from New York, a bunch of people from that improv team had moved to New York and started taking classes and doing comedy at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater up here. So from watching them, I was like, oh, okay, so that's how you do it. Like, that's how you pursue comedy. You go to New York, and I mean, there isn't a completely straight path. But for me, the path was, I was like, I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to take these improv classes at UCB. I'm going to move up through that system because at UCB, you take different classes and you move through until you get to 401, or at least this is how it worked at the time I was there. You take 4 introductory classes and then you can move on into advanced study and you can try to get on their house teams, which are like prestigious to get onto the house teams. So I came to New York and I knew how to do that. And that gave me a structure of stuff to pursue while also meaning that I met a bunch of other comedians and people my age because we're all in these classes together. And then we're forming teams outside of our classes and we're doing shows and we're putting each other on the shows. So it kind of all came together that way. And then I started really honing in on, I always just really liked doing stand up and characters and like solo performance as well. Like I loved improv, but I also just wanted like all the attention for myself. So so I started hosting shows with my friends where people like I would host my own stand-up show. So you just get like a room in the back of a bar and you invite your friends and you beg people to come and you make it free and you just like try to get people to come see you do comedy. And so that was like the first couple of years until I finally did get on. A couple of things happened simultaneously. It's like putting in a lot of groundwork, never being paid, never doing like 10 people coming to your show. And then slowly